Welcome to another episode of This Week in Metropolis. I'm Matt.
And I'm the drunk beard one. This week, we've got Jakejames Lugo, the writer, podcaster, and YouTuber who reviews games. He plays games, everything games, just does games. That's what he does.
He loves games, and he knows a lot about games, more than we do, probably.
He also likes Star Wars. So, what's not to like about this guy?
Exactly.
It's a great episode. Please check it out.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to welcome you to This Week in Metropolis.
Welcome to another episode of This Week in Metropolis. Thank you for joining us. We are joined this week by writer, YouTuber, podcaster, Jakejames Lugo. Jakejames, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you guys for having me. Nice to meet y'all in digital person or whatnot, in digiform and stuff.
That's it.
It's good to just come chat with y'all. It's nice to see y'all.
Well, this is the new normal, isn't it now? I think me and Matt have lived the last year working together this way. So, I mean, what better way to meet new people this way as well? Exactly. Thank you for reaching out to us to come on the show. It was a privilege to be contacted and that you wanted to join us.
Yeah. I was just like, you know what? Why not? Why not just come say hi and just come chat games? Like, why not? There's nothing to stop anybody from doing that. It doesn't matter what size you are or whatnot. It's just like, if you're all talking games and you're all having fun with it, why not join in on it?
So tell us about yourself, because I hadn't actually come across your page or your YouTube channel prior to you getting in touch with us. And I think this is one of the pleasures that we have of doing the show that we do, because you obviously, I'm assuming you're actually familiar with Patrick Hickey Jr.
Patrick's my friend, yeah. Like, we've done a couple things together, and I've had Patrick on one of my shows on my YouTube channel in the past, and together recently, like most recently, we were on a digital panel for, was it Uplink at LI Retro Gaming Expo, digitally. Like, we were part of the same panel. I did like 6 panels that day, and he was on one of them where we got to talk games.
Awesome. So tell the listeners and the viewers, what's your background with your channel and how you got involved in what you do?
Oh man, it's a lot. Like, pretty much I've been doing games content, writing about games, being critical or, reviewing games, and just being part of the discussion about games for now going on almost 12 years. Like, I'm going to hit my 12-year mark in January of 2022. And I've been doing it professionally for, again, that long. I just love talking about video games. My very first video game was Sonic the Hedgehog, on the Sega Genesis. Me and the Genesis have a very intertwined destiny or an intertwined fate, because I was born in the same year that the Mega Drive was released in Japan. And then it came here a year later as the Genesis here in the United States. But I just love games. After playing that, the rest is history, where I just couldn't stop playing. I loved engaging with all different consoles. I'm part of that era of gamers that are part of the quote unquote real console wars, where people were literally in the whole midst of like the whole Super Nintendo, Sega Genesis fiasco with the 16-bit console wars. Yeah. And it wasn't really necessarily like the constant debates and back and forth you see now online on social media. It was really more about, it's almost kind of like the Jets and the Sharks from like West Side Story a little bit, or like, the different clans and like Shaw Brothers Kung Fu films, where everybody's like part of the same discipline, part of the same pastime and the same hobby, but we all just have different flavors and different kind of like own personal preferences. I remember the time where a lot of people now these days wouldn't really kind of, engage with that as much, because there's access to a lot of different stuff now, where you would go to people's houses because you simply didn't have the other console. Where I had a Sega Genesis and I had friends, and one of my best friends had a Super Nintendo, and I would go there and play all the classics like Super Mario World, Donkey Kong Country, Final Fantasy 2, Final Fantasy 3, or 4 and 6 for some people. Like, a lot of different things like that. That's the kind of era that I come from, leading all the way up to now. When it came to being a professional and actually talking about games as a career, originally I wasn't going to get into that. Originally I wanted to develop games. I wanted to be part of the development process. And I came to quickly realize when I got into my college years that that's just not me. I'm not very analytical. I'm not very procedural, like what that's really required to be in game development, especially for indie development or even AAA development, how things can get very complicated. I just love talking about games in the same way that I described to someone not too long ago about talking about film with Roger Ebert and Gene Siskel. That's the best comparison I could put it to, because that's what every critic derives some sort of inspiration or influence from, because they love film, they love movies. They talked about film constantly every single day for like almost a whole week. And they had a show that did that. And that's what they did. And, you know, we aspire to have that same level of passion, that same level of approach and professionalism when it comes to games criticism or any other form of entertainment. And that's what I used as a basis for me when I got into YouTube in 2009 to 2010, like around that area, up till now, where again, things have changed constantly. I've written for places like IGN, Playboy, The Coalition, Switch Player Magazine. Now I'm doing a thing with Red Bull Gaming recently. I just had a thing go published a couple days ago, which was about God of War, that used images from, I don't know if you guys know the Fourth Focus. They do a lot of digital photography for different games, like the different like in-game screenshots and stuff. They use that as like their own form of artwork, you know, and they do that from games like God of War, Horizon, Ghost of Tsushima, The Last of Us, you know, the list goes on. You know, a lot of PlayStation there, but they dabble around in a lot of other things. But I've been able and I've had the privilege and the opportunity to be part of stuff like that, or to be able to go to different events over time, like E3, PAX East, PSX, Comic-Con, a lot of local conventions in my area, because now I live in South Florida, but I've been able to go to a lot of Floridian conventions, a lot of geek, anime, gaming stuff that happens down here. And I've had the privilege to be a panelist and speak about games. I've even had the privilege that I'm really happy about, where I went to Miami-Dade College and I got to speak to a lot of indie developers or developers in the making, you know, as a person that's in the industry, talking to developers of the future, indie devs of the future, is like their relationship and their outlook on the gaming media or entertainment media. You know, stuff like that I felt like I could give a lot to them. And it's things like that I just appreciate. I just love. I love being a part of that stuff. And just, again, just talking about games is really where the whole heart of everything is at.
So what would you say, sort of going back to your sort of, you know, personal experience of gaming, what was you mentioned Sonic the Hedgehog, was that your first experience that really dragged you in?
Yeah, that was my very first game. That was literally my very first video game that I ever played. I remember it vividly because I was really young, again, like between 4 or 5 years old, because Sonic, I believe, came out in 92, 93, around one of those years. I could get a double check that on me. But I remember I played it afterwards. I went to a family relative's house. I believe it was one of my cousins or some extended family. And they had a Sega Genesis and they had Sonic. And when that first time when you hear Green Hill Zone, after the title screen, you know, it's Sonic the Hedgehog, it's all colorful stuff. But when you hear and see Green Hill for the first time and you hear that jingle, that iconic theme, that did it for me. And then everything else just was 0 to 60 from there. Like it was really, that was one of the few experiences that I can remember in my entire life that I have been playing games that really stuck with me in a very visceral way. There's been other games that have done that in years afterwards, but that was the very first for me. That's why I have it so close, you know, personally for me, the Genesis specifically, but also Sonic.
Yeah. Definitely. I remember at the time, my friend I'm a bit older, we was in sort of an early high school sort of age, and my friend getting one, I'm sure his was from Japan, so it was sort of one of the early ones, and I was always a Nintendo fan, so sort of I think at the time I probably had the NES, and and it was just something about with that console, just the controller was so different, wasn't it, from anything, and just the look of the
3-button first off was weird, and then we got the 6-button afterwards.
That's it. You're thinking, wow, what am I going to do with this extra button? But the speed of Sonic and everything like that, the style of Sonic, it was just
processing.
Yeah, it was the future. It was literally the future that you was looking at, compared to, you know, sort of, I don't know, playing Turtles or something like that on the NES, which seems so flat compared to anything on that.
Yeah,
the speed of it, wasn't it? It was the speed of Sonic as well. Not
really,
like, no pun intended, but
actually, it was a little more than that.
When you played it.
It was a little more than that, because it was the speed, which was one thing, which was just, you know, the RAM, I believe, of the console compared to the Super Nintendo. I think at the time, again, because I know people have talked about it over the years, but really it was not only the presentation of Genesis games or just Genesis in general. They tried to be more mature. They tried to appeal to the teens that wanted to rebel a little bit. They wanted to be a little bit much more crazier, but also just the marketing of that console, specifically the American marketing, because when the Genesis was out in Japan as the Mega Drive, it really didn't have the cachet or the pizzazz that it got later on as you got towards more into the console wars and into the life cycle of that console.
It was that bad boy image, almost.
Yeah. It's the one with the leather jacket, finally. That was the leather jacket of the gaming world at that time.
It was. And that's what that show, Matt, we've talked about it loads of times. It was on Netflix. They really went into that, didn't they? The difference between the two. And how the Sega Genesis or the Mega Drive was was like that kind of cool older brother that you looked at and thought, oh God, some of them games, they were just that little bit edgier.
But I never found that with the, and again, I don't know how it was sort of translated to the American market, but with the Master System that came before it.
Oh yeah, no, that was trash.
That was
literally trash. Like, I mean, we had iconic games in there. I think you got Alex Kidd on there and a few others, but the way that system was presented, because remember, that was going up against the NES that had Mario, that had Zelda, it had a lot of iconic games for just the games industry as a whole. You never really got a lot of that on the Master System. Even though they were classics, they just didn't feel and play as good as what you got on NES at the time.
And it looked bad. I thought, the look of the console was bad. And I didn't like the again, I don't know in the US whether it was the same as in the UK. Some of the boxes, like the box art, seemed like an afterthought.
It was like white and then had like
it's like a grid pattern or something with just a grid, token picture in it. Crazy.
So when did? So you said 2000, between 2008 2010 you started?
No, about 2009 2010, yeah, roughly.
2009 2010 you started doing the YouTube stuff.
Yes.
That must have been, I mean, even for us doing a podcast, and when we started doing, we didn't go straight into video and putting it on YouTube. And I think it was only season 3, Matt, 4 maybe. Yeah. We might have started doing video as well. And it's quite a big step up, really, to have your presence and your face on a platform which anyone can access.
True.
From us watching your show, and we've checked out a fair few of your videos between us, there's a real professionalism about your show, and almost a bit of, you've got a bit of a charm about you,
Thank you.
A presenter charm, which I think really shows in your videos. Like, is that kind of from an early age you felt you had that, or is that built as you've gone on? Do you look back at your early shows and go, oh God, like we probably do with ours?
It's a couple of different things, because I definitely, like any other person, if they tell you otherwise, they're lying to you. When you look at your older stuff, you wince and you're like, I can totally do this better. Like, this is trash. This is get this out of my face. Like, don't even like show this to anybody. But like a lot of that stuff, the way that I speak and the way that I try to present on camera, even the way that I talk to you now, that's the product of a bunch of different things. Number one, the way that you talk to people naturally, between family and between how you interact with other people outside of all this, that comes into play, which I think now more these days in the modern era of both YouTube and content creation and gaming and stuff, that's become much more important, because people are looking for that authenticity in some way, not just in video, but even in podcasts or in writing, a lot of different things. The other thing too, which I tell everybody constantly, and nobody believes me, but I really believe this is an important thing for making yourself better with the way you speak and the way you construct videos, is learn how to write first. When you learn how to write features and you learn how to write editorial, that helps you and aids you in such a big way in how you develop your voice when it comes to presenting a video or presenting yourself in a video, and how you speak to your audience. I think that without that, because I started off first, before I even got into YouTube, I started off first writing stuff for the website that I was with at the time, which was Real Otaku Gamer. That was really like the first website that I started doing content, even though it might have not just been video content, but like writing editorials, being on podcasts, doing all this different stuff. And also keep in mind, while at the same time learning and watching a lot of the big pros at the time, including IGN, including Game Trailers, Jeff Keighley over there, G4, which everybody of that era watched G4. I don't care who you were, like you got a lot of influence from X-Play, from Judgment Day, from Attack of the Show, even before Attack of the Show, Screensavers, a lot of different things like that really kind of, came together and helped at least, formulate or influence the way that I wanted to construct my content in the years that followed. And I think as far as YouTube is concerned, really my biggest influence for getting into YouTube, which not necessarily the way that I make my content, but to take that initial first step or that jump into it, was watching people like Darkside Phil, or watching a lot of the Let's Players of that era, because a lot of people don't like Darkside Phil now because he's trash in a lot of things. But a lot of the other influences back then, even the Angry Video Game Nerd, which, predates a lot of us, for a lot of different reasons, and other content creators at the time. Equals3 was another one that I remember watching, not as much as some of these other guys, because I was more specifically into gaming stuff, but really a lot of the way that they made their content, they put themselves out on camera. And I kept thinking to myself, even back then and even now, if all these people could put themselves out there and talk about stuff the way they want to talk about and find people that either listen or even like or agree with what they have to say, there's nothing to stop me from doing the same thing. And I shouldn't have anything to fear with it. You know, that's that you get over that initial hump of all these like people watching. It's the same as like public speaking. Eventually you just kind of roll with it.
Yeah. Yeah. You realize it's actually you that's putting that pressure on yourself rather than it's your judgment, isn't it, rather than what anyone else is going to place on it. What I found from when you introduced yourself to us, and I went down a bit of a rabbit hole watching your videos. The thing that really comes across is you come across incredibly knowledgeable about the subject that you're talking about. Is there a lot of research and preparation?
It's a combination of yes and
reviews?
No. A combination of yes and no. A lot of it, most of the time, I would even say, even for myself, is more about through personal experience, which you could say is research, you know, in of itself. Yeah. But I equate personal experience to me as just playing stuff just to play and just like pulling stuff from like my background, from my history, from my childhood or earlier ages and stuff like that. For me, research is when you're playing a game and then you go look up stuff. Like you actually go read some stuff. Like you actually go look for references and stuff. That's just me and my own personal thing as someone that's been writing for years. That's the way that I kind of like break it down. But all of that is like previous knowledge and research and stuff all coming together to do stuff. And I think that's important because, you know, you obviously don't want to talk about something you have no knowledge of. I mean, we hear about this same complaint even in the regular games media now or entertainment media, where it comes off more that people are speaking on things that they don't really have a full understanding about or they don't have a full knowledge of, especially in the way that they talk to the audiences, which I think is a whole nother conversation related to it. But, you know, people could tell immediately when they see you in the way that they hear you speak, whether you know what you're talking about or not. You know, sometimes they might be wrong, but majority of the time they're not.
So does that influence you, JJ, on what games you decide to do a review on? Because if it is a game that's not really in your interest levels, are you going to spend time to do it, or do you feel it may potentially change your mind on what you feel about it?
Sometimes it does, and not in the way where it's like, oh my God, I'll never play this type of game ever and stuff. Perfect example of this, what happened to me recently. I don't know if you guys got to see, but I did the Jedi Fallen Order review. And the only reason why I did that was because one, it was Star Wars month and I wanted to do a whole month of Star Wars games. And that's one of the biggest Star Wars games to come out recently from EA, you know, for a lot of good reasons. Again, in the review, I even say this is one of the best Star Wars games of the modern era. But one of the things that really kind of made me worry about approaching something like that, and I've been on record for saying this, even as someone who did a guide for IGN based on this genre, is that I don't like the soul style games. I don't like the soul style genre because I always feel like it's very restrictive. It's very kind of like, you know, taxing on a person because it's so frustratingly hard. And I thought that game was going to end up being the same way because it's exactly built like Dark Souls or Bloodborne or Sekiro or Neo or any of these other games that follow that similar format, because they're all based off of Demon Souls in some way. But one of the things that made me change up my view on that is because when I finally got into it and realized their approach to it and how they didn't make it so that way it's so like, you know, harsh on the player, then I started to open up into that genre a little bit more and change a little bit of my perspective to it, to a point which maybe down the line, maybe I'll go back to a Dark Souls or I'll go back to Bloodborne and look at it from a different lens. But like, there's been times where I've thought about stuff, but it's never really stopped me from like actually maybe sitting down and actually playing stuff. I mean, a couple other games I could think of now that are like retro games I've done in the past, the Splatterhouse games, and those I have like a connection to because I played those back when they were fresh, you know, at least, you know, it's like a Genesis anyway. Or looking at games like Eternal Champions, which is another like a fighting game because I'm big in the fighting genre. That's another game where I look at it from a different lens, having years of experience within the fighting genre and the competition stuff. Or going back and playing Bioshock. I did it for Halloween this year. My original plan was to do Bioshock 1 and 2, but you only have so much time, and I wanted to get to PT, I wanted to get to Splatterhouse and other stuff, but going back and playing Bioshock again and then really come to the realization of like how much of that game is a masterpiece, you know, through a different lens, looking at it as a first-person shooter, specifically as besides like a story-based or plot-based game and stuff. You look and you think about different things as you're talking about, or at least as you're approaching the type of content you want to make for your channel. The one thing I've always maintained that's consistent, despite whatever game that I play, is that I'm always coming out with something consistently all the time. Every single week, I have a brand new game that I at least a couple of videos that I've highly edited or put together like that. I was always of the mindset, like review a game every single week. Because if Siskel and Ebert, it could actually do a video, a movie review every single day. And that's like, takes up time and stuff like that, there should be no reason why I should at least approach it with the same etiquette like that, you know, because I don't see a lot of other people doing that. Some do, but not everybody has the same approach, or at least has the same reverence for the craft like that.
That's it. And I think what it really comes across in, well, what I find incredibly refreshing about your channel, and what made me sort of go down a real rabbit hole with it, is it seems like that there is such diversity in the games that are presented, you know, and it's not just what you find with many sort of YouTube channels and that they try and it's sort of like feeding the algorithm in terms of, oh, this is trending, I'm gonna, you know, go with this, but the effect of the diversity on your channel had me clicking for more. It was the I can't remember the first one I watched, but then I saw another video. Wow, Soul Calibur! I forgot about Soul Calibur. I've got to watch that.
I did up to 4 right now. I did 4 Soul Calibur. I'm going to do 5 soon too. So
amazing. So I was watching that, and then there was another like WWF Superstars on the arcade.
That was WrestleMania the arcade game. WrestleMania arcade game, and we did for a Rumble. Yeah,
so
it's funny you say that, right? Because that's purposeful. That's something when I was thinking about my content for my channel, because this is my second channel that I've done. My first channel was really stuff that I did in the past, which really was me trying to figure out the craft and stuff. But like when I really started the second channel, which is the one I have now, one of the big things that I wanted to do was that I wanted to show that I have a very wide palette of games and the types of games I could talk about and approach, because that comes from my need and my desire to be part of the gaming media, where you have to be a little bit of a Renaissance person or a Renaissance man, because you have to have a wide palette of stuff. It's the same approach to Siskel and Ebert, where they looked at a lot of different types of film. They didn't just review like artsy films. They didn't just review the AAA, like, you know, blockbuster films. So no, they talked about film, which is everything. They had a wide open door and net for this. And I find that a lot of YouTubers, even though a lot of them do get very popular and deservedly so, they put a lot of work and effort into it. The problem that I find though is that you only really go to them for one type of thing. There is no like, you know, person that you come to talk about the games to. There are a few out there. I think like you have the Angry Joes of the world, you have the Con Moriartys, you have, you know, the Angry Video Game Nerds, you have a lot of different people. You know, you could throw in even PewDiePie to some extent, even though he does a lot of like comedy stuff. He's not really a critic. But like you have some of those people that try to be diverse and try to be a little bit much more open to doing more stuff. But the majority of people that I do see on all platforms, YouTube, on Twitch, and even on like places like TikTok, Instagram, Facebook gaming, whatever, they're really trying to stick to one type of niche. And that might be good for a time trying to build up an audience, but eventually down the line in the long run, I feel like that's going to be a real big restriction, because then what else are they going to apply their stuff to? What else are they going to be able to talk about? Like they can't sit on here on this type of show or any other show and talk about games. They can only talk about one type of game that they probably play that their audience knows them from, or what they've been spending hours playing. You know, to me, I don't want to be like that. I don't want to be so kind of like restricted and put into a box like that. I want to be able to say that I could talk about games. I could talk about almost any type of game that's out there.
Yeah. I think it's the comparison you keep making with sort of film, I think is becoming increasingly relevant as well, because I think now well, for a few reasons, the video games industry is now matured to the point where there is that back catalogue of, you know, in the same way as you may look at cinema and look at the 90s or the 70s and pick out the classic sort of films of that time. You have that to a certain extent now, and particularly because you know, now games are digital, it's a lot more accessible often to get these old games, whereas otherwise it would have been a conversation of, oh, do you remember that game? But I've not played that for years because it's you know, it's really expensive or really hard to get. It's a lot more accessible now, and I think that's such a positive thing that we can look back at, you know, as you mentioned, Splatterhouse or something like that, and reference that and think, oh, that was a really good game. Whereas I think at a point, particularly with the games industry, and correct me if I'm wrong, sort of with this, is that you were looking at the next generation, and then the previous generation sort of fell to the wayside a bit, because you're like, oh wow, I've got this console, and this console's much better now, so I'm sort of forgetting what I did before. I think now we can look back and think, no, actually, that was really good, you know, and I loved
it's
playing
funny
that
you
game.
Say that too. It's funny that you say that too, because the way I look at it is that I draw a lot of the inspiration and comparisons to film criticism, but I don't think that the processes are exactly the same. And that's where people get caught up on, because the way you look at games is very different than you look at film. However, the approach that you do it with the mindset that you do it with, I think is where you could be very similar to it. I even would say the same thing about music, the music industry, about music criticism with albums, and especially like, you know, pop music and rap, hip hop, etc., where the critique of it, like looking at the industry aspect of it, there's a lot of parallels there. Even though, again, in games, our thing is that we have experiences that are overextend over a longer period of time than most other medium. You know, comparing a 3 or 4 hour movie, even, I'll give you that, to like a 50+ hour RPG or JRPG, or like a 20-hour narrative experience and stuff. There's very different things that you got to do with it. You got a lot of planning and a lot of other stuff you got to take in, a lot more information and stuff of experience to take in like that to formulate an opinion. I also think that one of the problems / perks of being in games criticism or games critique or game reviewer and stuff is that sometimes people always get caught up on what game reviews are. They try to say that they're one thing or the other. Really, when it comes down to it, is that you're making a subjective opinion, or like whatever opinion that you have. It's a subjective statement based off objective facts. And a lot of people try to conflate one or the other. They're always trying to say that, oh, game reviews are always objective. They're based on like, you know, what the facts are. And that's true to a point, or that they're always subjective. And sometimes they outright ignore certain elements that are objective facts of certain reviews. You see this all the time, even with some of the bigger, larger websites. There's no real understanding of why is it that they encompass both, and why is it that it's really the opinion of the person that's subjective, even though objectively they're playing the exact same game that everybody's going to be playing. It's just they're going to feel different about it.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that you say that, because I often say about kind of movie reviews that we read in magazines and things like that, and if someone comes out and says, you know, gives their review and it's only 1 star or 2 star, in my opinion, when you're just reading what they've experienced in that for a film, I still think it's down to the person who's watching it to how they will appreciate that film or not. You know, there are films that might have been absolutely canned in reviews in magazines, but I might think some of them are really good because that's you know, a film that I appreciate. I think the difference with watching you when you do your reviews of a game, it's the difference is you can see it as well. I mean, with a movie, obviously you're reading what someone's put after they've seen it. You're not getting any sort of scenes of what they've seen or whatever. So with yours, I think that's one of the benefits, because yes, you might say, oh, this is sticking a little bit, or there's a bit of a glitch in this part of the game or whatever, or it could be that it's amazing, but you're looking at it and you're still kind of questioning what it is about the game. But I think you've got that 2 layers to it. Not only are you playing it and giving your thoughts on it, you're actually seeing it as well, which I think is, you know, is really cool.
I think there's another part of that I think we all should understand too. And I think it comes down to the poor execution of the writing on some of those film reviews that you referred to. And I think you could even say that about some game reviews, especially written ones, that it comes down to them not being able to fully convey in the best way possible how they feel or what they experience. Because I write reviews and I make video reviews almost in the exact same way, where it's like, listen, this is how I felt about something, but this is what's there. I think that's where a lot of it gets lost, and where you see a lot of written reviews, especially now these days. And there's plenty of examples that people could go look up, you know, that of different like popular games that have gone into some different types of controversies or whatnot, that where it gets away from what's actually in the experience, what's actually there, you know, because you see a lot of reviews where they're writing about what they wish the game was rather than what it actually is. And I think that's unfair, not only to the game itself, but to the developers that actually made that game. And I think that's something that's really bad. And that's a failure on the person that's writing that review or constructing that review, because they just can't, they want to convey their thoughts and their feelings, but they're getting too caught up in their feelings about stuff that has nothing to do with the experience they're trying to judge. And I think that's the fault of the reviewer or the fault of the critic in that regard. And again, it applies to games, it applies to film stuff, it can apply to anything in that regard. I think that a lot of people, when they read and they see stuff like that, they can immediately tell without even really like conveying or explaining what it is, if a review is really constructed well, if they do stuff like that very well.
It's interesting that you say that, because mentioning controversial gaming stories, it's now time for another one of these.
Question mark. Gentlemen, thank you for having me back on. My question is about Cyberpunk. I saw something from the creators that collectively it's been played for 600 million hours. And my first thought was, I don't know how anyone's been able to do that. So I don't know if your guest has any particular opinions on Cyberpunk, if they've played it. I know we've had our own conversations about it, But yeah, what do we think about that game so far? Cheers.
Question mark. I mean, I've not played it.
I've not played it either.
I played an amount of it on PC, I should say, because during the holidays, like during Christmas time or whatnot, my cousin came over and he brought his laptop because he has a better rig than I do, and he was able to play it at max settings, Cyberpunk on PC like that. But I haven't been able to play it on consoles.
What are your thoughts on it with the controversy of the kind of
just flat out? Just straight up, like, the game is not good when it comes to presentation and being technically sound. It is a game that is flawed heavily. I think there's a lot of excuses being made for the game, because there's I'm telling you right now, even in my own experiences playing on a very good laptop, a gaming laptop, which people could argue is like, oh, there's better desktops that you have like nicer stuff. No, this gaming laptop I had was nice, flat out. But at the very beginning of the game, I was experiencing problems. I was experiencing bugs. I was experiencing glitches. I was experiencing visual like hiccups, that stuff like clipping through walls, certain things that are just like disappearing and reappearing. What is it with the like clips and stuff? I was experiencing stuff that probably wasn't triggering and I couldn't tell probably at some point, and I hadn't played more. I probably played maybe about 3 or so hours, maybe 4 hours worth of the game there, and obviously I didn't see the full experience of it, but I played enough within that first hour or so to really tell that this game has a lot of big issues, and it's not an excuse. It should not be an excuse to say that and just like look at it and just continuously judge the game with all these high scores. I think that the game, compared to a lot of reviews out there, should be scored significantly lower, because you should not have a lot of technical bugs and glitches in a AAA game when it releases like that, no matter what platform it's on. The PlayStation 4 version of this game is an embarrassment. It's completely like in some cases I think it crashes or it doesn't run properly. Like it's a mess. That's one of the reasons why they pulled it off the PSN on top of all the other stuff that happened with it. But when you're playing a game on PC that's supposedly supposed to be optimized for the PC, even though some people say it was optimized for consoles, but like when you're playing a game on PC, you got the tech behind you got the guts behind it, you should not be experiencing the things that I saw on there. That's just flat out bottom line. Even the biggest CD Projekt Red fan has to admit that. Like, this is CD Projekt Red. Let's not forget that. This is the makers of the Witcher series, Witcher 3, one of the best RPGs out there. Plain and simple. That it had its problems, but nowhere near like this. Like this is just terrible embarrassment.
And those sort of things are sort of like day one of testing. That's really not working. We need to sort that out, isn't it?
Dude, they had patches that broke the game. They had to release patches for the patches. Like, come on.
Do you think it's though? I remember, and James and I were the same, when the previews of it came out, and I think
I was there. I was at E3. I got to see it at E3.
Wow. And
I was there. I went to go see it with CD Projekt Red, and they gave us a little demo there like that. I even had the jacket. I mean, I don't have it now, but I got it in the closet. It's the CD Projekt Red Cyberpunk 2077 jacket that everybody was walking around like showing stuff. I got one of those from seeing the game.
So cool. And watching that, I think it was 45-minute sort of preview that you could watch. It's like the play of the game. It looked incredible, and I think it was built up to such a height in terms of that expectation of thinking, wow, this is a game that a lot of people.
It's the future.
Yeah, exactly. That people are thinking, wow, this is what I want out of a game. I want to be able to have choice. I want to be able to have consequence, and a lot of games have promised it. With some of the GTA games have promised that sort of interaction, and they get to a certain point in terms of if you do something may happen, and so on, and the different characters. But this seemed to, it promised everything almost, and clearly
didn't deliver.
Something went wrong.
Did not deliver. And the sad part is that this is CD Projekt Red. Like, this is they show they've done this with The Witcher 3. Like, that should be the par for them on something like this. It really tells you something that when they were touting about, I remember back then touting about how there's going to be multiple paths, there's going to be a lot of options, a lot of permutations, with a lot of stuff that you get involved with within the narrative of the game. But when people were able to somehow finish Cyberpunk and like get to the end and actually show it, like, it literally was almost like converging in the same way, with not a lot of differences no matter what discipline that you went with. There was 3 different disciplines you could have in Cyberpunk, and they all pretty much end the same, and that's a damn shame. Like, it's not even on the par of what we got from like something like Mass Effect, which just got re-released not too long ago. Like that should be, if you're going to tout about how much there's diversity in outcome for a lot of stuff within your RPG, it should at least have a diversity of like conclusion.
Yeah.
100%. 100%. I just wonder whether too much emphasis has gone into. I mean, you mentioned there, Matt, and again, I remember us watching it probably during work time, watching that 45-minute video or whatever it was. Is too much emphasis put onto the kind of the cutscenes in games and the video play? I mean, there was in-game footage from that, if I remember rightly.
I think that 45 minutes was actual
combat.
sort of gameplay, wasn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, there was stealth and then there was like head-on combat.
Yeah.
Yeah. So do you think too much is emphasised on the build for it? I mean, you've got to have a build for a game, but that game, I mean, on minimal information, already had the build.
It
and then to
amazing.
Put it all out like that, to put it out like that. I mean, Mark, who sent the question in, and a few other friends of ours all got it, and were just so, disappointed.
You know what that's a product of? That's a product of like everybody's expectations being through the roof, and that's CD Projekt Red's fault, straight up. Like, they hyped that game up for a long time, and again, we expected it because we saw what they could do prior to it. Everybody's talked about this many times ever since the game came out, but it's the total truth is that they set themselves up for failure. That was totally their fault, and a lot of stuff behind the scenes is clearly their fault. On top of that, like they even had problems with their investors that just weren't being told certain things. Like there was a whole mess of reasons why that game turned out the way they did. I think that now that they're going to have a very difficult time going forward after all this, whatever their next game is, they're going to go back to The Witcher eventually. They're going to have to at some point, but it's going to be very hard for a lot of people to trust CD Projekt Red again after what they did clearly, which was not premeditated, but like, so blatantly obvious, by the time this game came out. It's just a damn shame.
Yeah. And no matter how good that next game is, that next game could be 10 out of 10. Perfect.
Everybody's going to be suspect of it, straight up.
Yeah, exactly. And they're going to be looking for every little issue that they can possibly find. And has there, on that note, I mean, has there been a game for you that you absolutely despise? Is there any game that's really...
Yes, there's one game that comes to mind, and that's Naughty Bear. Naughty Bear is one of the most like bad tasting games that I've ever played. Like here's the thing, and I've come to terms with this over the years. The game itself is not a game that's like can be easily like offend you or really that much of a big deal. It's just that when I played it, it doesn't play that very well. It's kind of trash. But then on the fact that it involves like teddy bears, it's just something about it. It's like looking at the Teletubbies kill each other. Like that, it just feel bad afterwards. It's like it's not a huge deal. People always tell me over the years, like, Jay, you're making a real big deal about this. This is stupid. And I was like, yeah, I know it's stupid, but it's like watching Winnie the Pooh kill Piglet. Like, you don't want to see that. Like, come on, man. Like,
there's probably someone who does though.
I played worse games. I played technically worse games than Naughty Bear, but that's the one that's always rubs me the wrong way. It's like, this game is bad, man.
I need to look that up. I've never heard of it.
It's so bad. They had the audacity to release a Game of the Year edition of this game. I was like, are you kidding me? Are you kidding me right now? Get this out of here. Like, oh my God, it's a shame.
Going back to sorry, go on.
I was just going to say, James, have you got a game that you've absolutely...
with my collection of games, although
which FIFA?
Which FIFA was it? Yeah. There was definitely one. Bad games, God. Do you know what? It wasn't a bad... I've said this before to you, Matt, but it wasn't necessarily a bad game. But the first Metal Gear Solid that I played, was it on the PS4?
Guns of the Patriots?
Maybe. I just remember, I started up, I was a huge Metal Gear Solid fan. And Mark, funnily enough, he gave it to me. And he said, yeah, start playing it. I remember it starts off, and I'm sure I was on like a boat or something like that. And it was so dark, I don't know whether it was the brightness on my TV.
Yeah, it's got to be a TV.
I just could not find out what I had to do. And I ended up giving up on it. I was just like, back to FIFA. But yeah, that one for me. How about you, Matt?
The one that always sticks in my mind, it was on the Super Nintendo. And I remember renting it from Blockbuster at the time, and it was called Family Dog. And when you if you look up Family Dog on Wikipedia, which I've done in recent years, apparently it was like it originated from this cartoon And I think Steven Spielberg or someone like that had something to do with it. So like it's mad sort of back history to it. But basically, the game was just, you could tell they probably made it in 2 days. And all the collision detection was off. You'd try and jump on something, you wouldn't. And the whole premise in the game was you was this dog and you ate cheese. And then you barked at things with your smelly breath, basically, to defeat it. And that was it. And I remember sort of bringing this home I think it was more the experience of bringing it home after renting it and putting it in and thinking, what have I done? I've got this.
That was the experience of everybody back then, because you took a chance. Like you didn't have a lot of trailers at some point, especially early on in like that 16-bit era, like that, because you were basing things off a box art, which is a lost art form as far as I'm concerned. And then when you brought something over and played it, you realized that was your weekend or that was your next couple of weeks.
Yeah, that's it.
That's all you got.
Yeah, definitely. But going back to your reviews, JJ, we actually had last week, we spoke to Andy Robertson, who he's on Twitter, he's Geek Dad Gamer, and he's got his own YouTube channel, and it's more to do with family gaming, and he started it back up in 2009, I believe. I think so, similar sort of time.
Oh, similar sort of time.
And and his was all around when the Wii came out, and it was kind of focused on that. And he was telling us last week when he started reviewing games, like he said, he was a journalist before and a games journalist, and he'd speak about a game and they'd say, "Oh, do you want to review it? We'll send it to you." And then he'd go, "Okay, where do I send it back?" And they say, "Oh, no, you keep it." So when you're doing yours, is it the same scenario now? Is that what you're doing?
Yes.
Or
yes, I could say that now that I've done it for so long. Yeah, like that's totally a thing. I've even had it with tech. That I've done tech review. I don't know if you guys ever seen the videos I did of the Astro gaming headsets. Those are all in my collection. Same with the Turtle Beaches that I have like that. And that could add up really fast because those are not cheap. And you walk into a GameStop, you see how much those cost. You're like, damn, like these better be like good headsets.
Yeah.
But with games, like, that's a thing. Now it's a little bit more where they send you a digital code because everything could be downloaded. And that's just, it's not so much out of like they just don't want to send you the physical copy of the game. It's more out of convenience where you could just give the person more time, and also as soon as they see the email they could just go and download. Like that literally, I can't say which game it is now, but that literally happened before we started recording now. I just got a game that's coming up really soon that I'm going to get to review that's pretty big now at the moment. But it's a thing that happens for people and for outlets that have not only shown the backlog of work and the pedigree of stuff, and also the ability to show that they're fair for a lot of stuff. Like I've gotten games from different publishers where they have a big name or they're really popular, and I've criticized them, but they've never stopped working with me. And the reason being is because you see a lot of people on YouTube, but this is a constant problem with a lot of influencers and especially YouTubers, where they dump on a game that's bad, and they do it because they know that the audience and the viewership that they have likes it when they just like eviscerate something and that they're harsh on it. That's just a thing that comes from the angry video game nerd, straight up. That's all that comes from. And the problem is, though, when you're doing that, even though it could be under the guise of humor and stuff, some people just go way too far with it, and it comes off more as like being a jerk and just not being fair. Like a lot of people, especially now, one of the biggest examples was The Last of Us Part 2. I played it later than everybody else because I wanted to get away from the noise of like what was the controversy of that game. And a lot of people were basing their opinions about leaks that didn't have a lot of context for a lot of stuff. Don't get me wrong, I'm of the mindset of a lot of people where that was not the best game of 2020. To me personally, it was either Hades, Ghost of Tsushima, or Final Fantasy VII Remake, for me personally. But you got to respect the level of quality and the production value of that game. That's not a 4 out of 10 game or a 3 out of 10 game or less, like what people are saying, solely because of this nonsense. They're just, when it comes to criticism, when it comes to like pointing out the cons and the negatives of a game, there's a way to do it without coming off so harsh and rude. That's the biggest problem. Yeah. And that in of itself, when it comes to like review code or review copies of games and access, it's really access for people that are creators or media in order to gain access to these games and be able to make the content that keeps sustaining them and stuff. That's something you have to think about, because you're not doing stuff based off of like what might happen based on your opinion and stuff. You're doing it as long as you're putting your opinion out there. You're able to put your opinion out there, but doing it in a way that actually makes sense and is actually professional.
So do you try to, you mentioned there The Last of Us 2, which I've got and still haven't actually got it out.
I wrote about it on Redbox. I wrote about it on Redbox.
Amazing. But with that, you said you kind of let the kind of dust settle before you started reviewing it.
Yes.
Are you usually, with the games that you review, are you hot on new releases, or do you try and mix it up a bit? And
sometimes I mix it up, and the reason why I mix it up is because not every game is approached the same way with me. Because with The Last of Us Part 2, I didn't do a video review on my channel, but I did write about it for Red Bull. I did about 3 or 4 editorial stuff that's going to be going up on Red Bull sometime soon, and it was about different aspects of the game and stuff. But also at the same time, I did the same thing with the first Last of Us game, The Last of Us and The Last of Us Remaster. I have the PS3 the PS3 version physically, and then I have the PS4 remaster version digitally, like that, because that game is good. That game is great, you know, for one reason or another. And I'm glad I played it later, because usually when new releases come out, it's all your opinion about it, or the outlook that you have about these games is always obscured by the opinions that are put out there on social media. It happens with everybody. Everybody says that they try to avoid stuff, but it's going to be tainted by what you see from other people. That's just a natural thing. There's nothing wrong with that. It's not inherently a bad thing. When you're reviewing games, sometimes, however, it's best to try to avoid it as much as you can, so you're not letting other opinions creep into what your own subconscious opinion is going to be. But I found myself enjoying a game like The Last of Us or The Last of Us Part 2 a little bit more when I was able to play without so much of the conversation on my feed and Twitter bombarded with hot takes about this game, or about the people that are talking about this game. Like, I just felt like it was just unneeded for me to do that. So when I finally did play Last of Us Part 2, I accepted it for what it was, and I just formulated my own stance on it while writing all this other stuff. And I just felt like I just took it in a little bit better.
And again, this is something me and Matt are quite cynical on, this sort of thing when it comes to TV shows and movies. I mean, we had shows like, you know, this divides opinion, because, and you might be one of these people that doesn't agree with what we say here, but Breaking Bad, it was so, I mean, Breaking Bad and Game of Thrones, I've never seen Game of Thrones, but everyone tells me I'll love it. But because it's so hyped and everyone's going on about it, I'd just rather wait and watch it in my own time rather than have to kind of
that's the best thing
make
to do.
sure I'm up to date. And
that's happened to me
Bad
before.
was the same. Breaking Bad was the same. And then when I did watch it, I didn't enjoy it.
You know, it's funny you say that, because that's happened to me with other games, even retro games. Like, one of the big games that I got a lot of flack for because of my review on it was Suikoden 2, because I reviewed Suikoden 1 and Suikoden 2, and I was eventually going to get to 3 and 4, but just again, time saying I never got to those. But when I played Suikoden 2 is considered by most people one of the best JRPGs out there. I think personally, after playing it and doing the review of it, I think it's overhyped. I think it's vastly overhyped, and it's a lot of people don't like that. They say that, oh, you don't understand it, you don't get all this stuff. It's like, son, I played this game like everybody else. Like, I just did it much later than everybody else, but I still sat down and played the game, and I even got video proof of me playing the game. So like, my opinion is pretty valid. Like,
it's your opinion. You know,
it's my opinion. This is the problem. This is the biggest problem when it comes to this with retro games. It happens with modern games and newer releases. Everybody gets upset when you don't agree with them. That's the biggest problem. And it happened to me because, again, I don't know if you guys saw, I did the IGN review of Naruto Ultimate Ninja Storm 4, and I also wrote the guide for it and I did the video review for it. So I did a lot of stuff for that game. A lot of people didn't like what I had to say about that game, because at the time that I played it, I was one of the only people that played the most of that game in the world, because that game, to me, I felt was just below par compared to the previous Ultimate Ninja Storm games. Like, I played all the Ultimate Ninja Storm games up to that point, and I played the most of that game at that point. And I said, listen, this is a 5.5 out of 10. This game is not as good. It just doesn't feel as good compared to other stuff. And there's other things that I feel like are just kind of lackluster. And everybody was so upset, especially the Naruto fans. They were pretty pissed off with me like that. And the other thing is, too, because it was IGN UK gave the game an 8 out of 10. And it's like, oh, you're IGN, you're supposed to have the similar opinion. It's like, no, it doesn't work that way, let alone different franchisees, different parts of the name IGN. But also, that person that reviewed that game probably didn't play as much or play in the same way that I did. I played the game, did the review, and also wrote the guide. I played everything about that game, and that's how I felt about it and stuff. And people were just upset because I wasn't scoring an anime game high enough, or that they felt like because I wasn't a fan of Naruto, that's why I was giving the game the low score that was. It's like, no, that's ridiculous. They look for every excuse to invalidate your opinion rather than just look at what you have to say. And Steve, you have the credentials with it and how you talk about it and what you back it up with your opinion.
Really, where that comes from is, like I said, you know, if it's anime and people are anime fans, oh God, you're saying an
it's
anime
not even just
bad,
that. Like, it's
you know?
it's like even big games like Nintendo fans sometimes get a problem with it because like it's another thing with them. It's like, listen, like I get you love these franchises. I get you love Nintendo. I love Nintendo too. We all love Nintendo, I think, on this podcast. I think we're pretty cool.
They still make bad games, though.
We love Miyamoto. We love Reggie over there.
Yeah.
Okay. However, when there's a spade that needs to be called a spade, we gotta call it a spade.
Yeah,
Not
exactly.
every Nintendo game is good. Nobody liked Chibi Robo. I think Chibi Robo is cute, but that game's not that good compared to everything else. Like, it's like, come on now. Like, it's just like you gotta call it what it is. We can't just give things a pass. You know what I mean?
No, that's it. Completely agree.
100%. Another question I've asked other people before who review games: do you try to complete them, or do you just set yourself a certain amount of time on them?
It depends on the game. Like, I think that you should always go into a game that you're going to review with the intention of finishing it. Okay, because nobody legit, and nobody that actually is about reviewing games goes into a game to half-ass it. Nobody's going in there just to play an hour and then write a review. That just does not happen. And when it does, you could tell immediately how it is. And those are usually the people that don't get to write reviews for outlets or for other places, or they just don't get a lot of views out there on their stuff. Okay, when you actually look at the content of like videos out there that are reviews, you could usually tell who's done what. I think the other problem is with this that we have to acknowledge all the time, especially now these days, is because, again, like I said, everybody's trying to look for a reason to invalidate your opinion. They're always trying to say like, oh, you didn't finish this game, or like the game gets good after 20 plus hours, like you played like 15 and like whatever. No, that's not the point of a review.
But why should you put in 20 hours for something to get good? That goes back to the TV series thing. Oh, wait until season 4 because it's really good. It's like,
yo, really, what about the other 3? Like the 20 plus episodes in all 3. Like the problem is, though, again, it's like nobody's going in there with the intention of just going halfway to play it.
Yeah.
The problem that you run into as a reviewer, when you're not enjoying something, okay, and you're playing like a couple hours, like I had this problem with Final Fantasy 13, you know, in the 13th series. Like, I just think those Final Fantasy games are horrible in comparison. They got great production value. They look good. They got an awesome soundtrack, but gameplay wise, they are terrible. And it's like, you know, when you have to play 20 plus hours to get to the point of Final Fantasy 13 where you could actually have an open spot to start doing stuff. It's the same thing as Final Fantasy 10. The difference is between those two games, you have a lot more fun playing through Final Fantasy 10 through those first 20 hours as opposed to Final Fantasy 13. Here's another example. This is a game that I thought was horrible, that I think was trash, right? I remember trying to remember the exact publisher with it or whatnot, but I remember playing through this remaster. I can't remember the name of it specifically, but it was a remaster of a PC game that was coming to consoles. It was like this air combat / machine type of combat game. And it's like the game was just horrible, but on top of that, the game had technical bugs to the point where the game would crash, like to the point that it would just completely take me back to my console dashboard. And people kept saying like, oh, this game is great, it does good multiplayer, it does all this stuff. It's like, no, son, this game has got technical problems. And it's within the first hour of me playing this. I'm not going to play through 20 hours of this at this point when there's clearly, somebody's going to spend money on this game and it's going to get that. And here's the other problem with that. Okay, even if you take away the idea of like technical issues of a game, okay, let's say a game runs perfectly, okay, and it's good, and like you're going through it, but it doesn't get great to experience until after the 30-hour mark and stuff. Keep in mind, there's still 30 hours or 29.99 hours or 29.59 hours and minutes, up to that point where things are supposed to get good. Somebody's going to spend money on this game and just have to go through all that to get to the good point. Like then now your opinion matters. After you get past that point, it's like, no, there's still all this period of time as a reviewer you got to look at that's going to impact the experience of most people. They might not feel the same as me, but they still are going to experience that, and that's still something that's relevant to my experience. You could even say that this happened to me recently, and for a review I haven't done yet, so we kind of get the first dibs on this. I'm doing my review of Doom Eternal right now. Okay, my video review of Doom Eternal. The multiplayer in that game is horrible. The multiplayer in that game is utter trash, and it's a far cry away from the single player content. The campaign is amazing. It's like, it's got a lot of great stuff, but I can't just ignore all this as a package. Like, there's still all this on top of the DLC and everything, but there's all this big chunk, a whole third of the game that's relevant. What am I just going to not talk about that and not have that into account of how I feel about the game overall? That people like to pick and choose some of these things with different games, especially different types of companies, especially now with Nintendo and PlayStation stuff, because people get too clanistic, or get in a clan mentality about what games and publishers they support. But it's just like, no, you got to, as a reviewer, if you want to be really about this life and about this craft, you have to see things and see the full picture in its entirety, and you have to judge accordingly. You have to call it as you see it, objectively.
Be honest.
Be honest. Be 100% honest, because being honest isn't the same as like appeasing your fan base. Sometimes you just got to say something that your fans are not going to like. Especially a lot of YouTubers don't understand that. They cater more to what works for them in their channel as opposed to what's real and what's honest.
Yeah, 100%. One of the things that I watched on one of your recent videos when you were doing Virtual Fighter 5, is it? That's on the new
channel, that just came out.
Yeah, and I loved the online battles that you were having and the rage quit.
The
that
super
was
salty rage quit.
So funny. But not just that, seeing you during it, I mean, that was right at the end of that video, and I did watch all the way through, just sit, which is a clever ploy, really, because obviously the whole YouTube algorithm thing is about kind of seeing it through. You need to get to that end just to see that rage quit. But I love how animated you are during the matches that you were having, or the fights.
This is funny.
It was brilliant. It's brilliant.
That's funny enough, because that's not the first time I've done that. Like earlier in my career, especially on Twitch, I used to play Pokken Tournament, and I used to play a lot of it on the Wii U. I wish I could do it now on Switch, but I just haven't gotten it for Switch yet. But like, I used to do that and poke fun at every time I would run into a rage quit. Even Street Fighter, because I play a lot of Super Turbo, and that happens frequently on Super Turbo and stuff. It's like, the problem is like, I know that it's kind of negative, and I know it's not really something that's part of the game as much, but people do this on the regular, so you might as well have a laugh about it. You might as well. They when you really think about it, they were so upset at losing that they decided to turn their console off or just go back to the dashboard. It's hilarious. Imagine this. Imagine, right? If you go to a basketball game, okay, and like LeBron James, okay, just for a second, so we can pick on LeBron, right? LeBron James has a bad night. The Lakers are losing. They're just garbage right there. He decides during the third quarter just to gets up and leaves. You know, and the other team wins by default. That's hilarious. It's utterly hilarious. That's exactly what happens every single time somebody rage quits in whatever game. It could be, fighting games, which is what I primarily did for the most part. First-person shooters, the puzzle games. Like, this happens all the time. So you might as well poke fun at it. It's just so funny to deal with.
It is. But it's true. You said it always amazes me. Not quite the same thing, but when you sometimes see the compilations of sort of gamers, like streamers and things like that, raging about they've lost or whatever, and I just think, really?
You're going to have to laugh at it. Just poke fun at them. It's like
when someone's like smashing something up on it.
Imagine seeing that in person. Like, you'll be freaked out because they got problems. They need to deal with their own maturity problems. But it's utterly hilarious. You're going to laugh your butt off after that.
Yeah, it's from a distance. Brilliant.
I have seen that as well. One of my mates who I remember a few years back playing FIFA around his. And literally, he was getting so frustrated. You can see like the hands on the control. It was like the controller was getting crushed, and then it was about to get thrown out the window. It was like, just chill out, Kevs. We can,
need to relax. Like,
have a beer.
Quell your sodium chloride level is all I'm saying. Don't let the NaCl overcome you. That's what I tell people. Like, don't get into a super salty rage quit because I'm going to clown you, and everybody else is going to clown you, and deservedly so. You deserve to get clowned if you let it get to you like that. It's just fun.
That's it. So, JJ, tell us a little bit about yourself outside of games reviews. We pointed out before we went and started recording, looks like you're a big Star Wars fan.
Yes. I'm a huge Star Wars fan. I come from a very big Star Wars family that in 1977, they got to see the opening of it in New York like that. I mean, they had the opening in California, which was at the Chinese amphitheater that everybody knows about. But that opened world, around the United States, they got to see it in 77, in New York in the Bronx. So that was a big deal for them. But yeah, I'm a huge Star Wars fan. Like, I grew up watching the original trilogy. I mean, obviously I saw the prequels in theaters. I saw the special edition in theaters, obviously the new Star Wars. I mean, one of the best experiences I've had within the last, I'm trying to think, it came out maybe 5-6 years ago, I think, when The Force Awakens came out. I went opening night to the IMAX theater here where I live, and it was just a fantastic experience. I went with family. We had the 501st Legion down here dressed up in costume with R2 units, sitting with us in the theater, having popcorn. It was so much fun. Like, the one thing about Star Wars, or just geekdom in general and stuff, which is why I love going to places like a Comic-Con, it's just a fun atmosphere. Like when you take away the nonsense, when you take away all the craziness of social media and the craziness of like what the media and a lot of other people that don't understand that part of the culture, take away their opinions and stuff. It's such a fun place to be around, a fun thing to be around, because it's escapism from all the crazy stuff happening in the world, but it's also fun at your own leisure. Like I'll tell you an experience that happened to me. I went to my first Comic-Con San Diego and I believe it was 2011, I think. But I went to Comic-Con San Diego, and I remember one of the most fun experiences with my dad, because we went together. He actually went with me to a 7-Eleven, and the person behind the counter was talking to another person buying something in Klingon. And that to me is like, that just does not happen. Okay. The other time at the same Comic-Con, right? As if that wasn't bad enough, right? The same Comic-Con, we go to the premiere of the Green Lantern First Flight movie. Okay, if you remember when the animated movie Green Lantern First Flight came out, they had the premiere there that we saw with the director. And while we were going in, they gave everybody these Green Lantern rings that lit up. So he gets on stage, gets ready to present the movie, but he gets all these thousands of people in that room, says, hold up their rings, turn them on, and start saying the Green Lantern Oath in unison. It was the most fun experience ever. My dad's looking at me like, what the hell did I just get myself into? Like, it was amazing. It was so much. And then, as if that wasn't bad enough, right? My dad, I go off to go do something, to go see a panel. I believe I went to go see the Attack of the Show panel with Kevin Pereira and Olivia Munn when they were hosting. My dad was hanging around checking out some stuff. He ran into Edward James almost randomly, but he also went into this counter and was having a drink and stuff. And Gene Simmons, dressed up in a bear outfit, takes off his mask, came over, sat down to my dad, bought him a drink, and they just started talking about their kids. Like, it just randomly. It's like moments like that is like you can only get in the geekdom world, universe. It's just fun to be around like that.
I remember being at Celebration Europe, which was in 2007. There's a bit sort of like a dining area part, and I remember going into the toilets, and I'm too tired. His name escapes me, which is really embarrassing. C3PO, the actor who plays C3PO.
Oh, okay, the actor that plays C3PO.
I can't think what he's called now. It's really shameful. I can't remember. I remember standing there washing my hands, and he was next to me, and it was quite a small sort of bathroom. It was just me and him. Like, you all right? Having a good day? Yes, fine. And one of those moments, what do I say? I should know what to say in this situation, but it was just one of those interactions.
I had a similar experience, or a friend of mine, when I went to E3, had a similar experience with that specific scenario, but with Hideo Kojima. It was the funniest thing, period. Like, and the best part is we got to clown him right afterwards, because he goes in, right, for the bathroom, goes out maybe about 10 minutes or so, give or take, doing his business. We think we're waiting on because we got to go do other stuff around E3. Comes back out white as a ghost. And we're like, yo, something happened. Like, because it's E3, anything could happen and stuff. He goes, guys, you don't understand. I just took a piss next to Hideo Kojima. And we're like, what? He's like, yeah, guys, you don't understand. Like, I literally just took a piss next to Hideo Kojima. So throughout the whole day, we were clowning this man, talking about, so let me get this straight. Did he show you his, his Solid Snake? Did he show you who his big boss right there? Les enfants terribles. Like, it was really fun just goofing on it. It's moments like that you could only get from our side of like geekdom, which is gaming, comics, anime, movies. So if you don't find that a lot in music, well, maybe they have their own stuff, but like in the world that I come from and the sides of the industry that I come from, I usually see and hear about stuff like that. And it's just cool. It's just something that you remember years later.
But do you know what? And I've said it before in a previous episode of ours, many episodes ago. I've only been to one Comic-Con, and that was in London probably 3 or 4 years ago. And me and my mates were going. We said, right, we're all going to dress up. And my surname's Steel. I went as the Man of Steel, so I had this Superman outfit on. I'd shaved my beard off. I was clean shaven. I had the hair.
You went all Kal-El on everybody.
I went all out. And I remember, like, just walking around, and this suit had kind of pumped up, cushions in it and all that. And literally, I remember walking around feeling like some sort of superhero because everyone else is dressed up. Do you know what I mean? And one of my mates was the Green Lantern, another one was Darth Vader. It was like something from Big Bang Theory. But anyway, we're walking around, and this mum come over to me and she said, "Can my son have a picture with you?" I was like, what? I thought, I'm not a celebrity, but It was because this little boy who was, I don't know, 6, 7, he saw me dressed as Superman and he wanted this picture. And I thought, God, and I think I remember you saying to me then, Matt, like, he's going to remember that for years. Like, because, and like you said, it's that kind of escape from reality. It's that kind of,
it really is.
you know. And going back to the movie side of it, like you said with Star Wars, I remember seeing the. Are you a big Marvel fan or?
Oh, of course, yeah. I've been to every MCU movie since the very beginning with Iron Man, like straight up every opening night.
Well, that trailer that was released recently for the next phase.
Oh,
and they
yeah.
showed the footage, the live footage. I think that was somewhere in America. I don't know where.
From Endgame, right?
And when Captain America gets the hammer
on your left, yep, yeah, that's real. I saw that on.
Do you know what?
Night.
And
That's
the atmosphere.
Vibe.
But it was the same. Me and Matt went to see it together over here in Little Old Norwich, and the cinema was packed out. And it was that kind of, you know, I'm getting goosebumps thinking about it now. It's
at the end, like when things happen. I mean, I don't know. It's fine to spoil it now, but like when things happen with Iron Man, like people were crying, grown men brought to tears. Like, you know, it's a fun thing. Like I think people even felt that way at the very end of Force Awakens when they saw Luke Skywalker for the first time. Like Mark Hamill being Luke Skywalker for the first time in like 30 plus years. That's a big deal. Like that's how I'm gonna feel now, because today, as we're recording this, they released the first teaser image of the bat suit from Michael Keaton's Batman in the Flash movie. I feel like I'm gonna be like that when I see Michael Keaton again in the suit. Like, and it's the Batman Returns suit. It's like it's things like that just hit you. They hit different. Like it's a real.
We need to look that up.
Oh yeah, it happened today. It was on Instagram. Everybody lost their minds when I first heard the announcement of that, and it was like Michael Keaton's coming back as Batman. That the whole world stopped for like a good 30 minutes. It's like, oh my God, like who would have thought that's something that like that would be possible, especially now when geek culture, when it comes to comics, especially in the movies, when it comes to gaming, has become such a big moneymaker for a lot of people, that stuff like this, that there are people in positions that are able to give us stuff like that, or at least have the conversation about doing stuff like that. Look at Star Trek, right? Nobody at one point when Star Trek The Next Generation was going on, nobody thought that Kirk would ever meet Picard. And look, it happened in the movie. Now, granted, obviously, it wasn't the best thing and stuff, but those are the moments that we remember. And those are the moments that I feel like, especially if you're a fan of whatever else, like a Doctor Who fan, you know, having a crossover with some of the other doctors within that series. Or like, you know, I feel like there's going to come a day when, especially with the superhero movies, that a Marvel character and a DC character would come together in some sort of project together. There was talk about it recently with Disney thinking about buying DC Comics, you know, from Warner Brothers, you know, before the Warner Discovery thing. Like there's conversations like that could happen that are possible now, which is great. And it just makes one very excited as a fan of this stuff. Like makes you want to just put up the money right up front and just be down with it.
Well, JJ, it's been a pleasure having you on. Can you tell our listeners and our viewers where they can find you on social media and your YouTube channel?
Sure, I'm in a lot of places. Like if you want to know the best spots to find out what I'm doing, like every single week on YouTube, it's youtube.com/gamerswithgains channel, or just search Jake James Lugo in the search bar. You'll find me immediately. Again, I'm uploading new reviews, new Let's Plays, unboxings, podcasts every single week. There's a bunch of stuff there that check it out. Subscribe to the channel. I'm trying to get past 10K subscribers. I've been like working my butt off to get to that, and it's been a long haul. So as I want to be able to do more stuff for everybody, because once you start getting those higher numbers, like I start doing more cool things and bigger things for everybody to enjoy. Follow me on Twitter at Jake James Lugo. I'm literally there every single day talking about stuff. Instagram at Jake James Lugo, same thing, posting up stuff about games, about what I'm doing and other things. I'm on patreon.com/Jake James Lugo, which I put up exclusive content on there, which is very cheap for like $1. You get a ridiculous amount of exclusive content, including videos, including podcasts, early access to brand new stuff that's going up on YouTube, sometimes super early access, and other things, behind the scenes looks that I do as well. And then finally, I have a Discord server that it's linked and all that stuff that you could just join for free. You know, I have a whole bunch of stuff for people to come and talk about games, talk about movies, talk about comics, anime, or whatever you guys want. Just come and just chill and be part of the community. It's a very welcoming spot. So yeah, come show some love. Just come say hi overall.
Awesome. Well, we will add the links in the description on the videos, and we'll share it all out there. But
thank you,
JJ. Thank you so much for joining us. It's been a pleasure.
I appreciate you guys having me. It was dope. You guys are great.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that as much as we did. Don't forget, if you did enjoy it, please like, subscribe on whatever platform you're watching and listening on, because in that way you won't miss out on any future episodes we put out.
Yeah, and don't forget to follow us on all social media platforms as well. We're on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. And give us a follow, and you'll be able to keep up to date with all of the latest episodes and posts that we put out there. But thank you for listening and watching.
And we'll see you next episode.